The floors of Titan Motors always shined by the time most employees left for the day. May worked her mop with practiced hands, moving quietly through the vast engineering lab after hours. The smell of motor oil and metal hung in the air, mingled with the lemon scent of her cleaning solution. She enjoyed this time alone with the machines. Their silent, hulking forms made better company than most people she'd met since moving to the city. Tonight, though, voices echoed from the main conference room. May adjusted her route, hoping to avoid the late meeting. Through the glass walls, she could see the company's CEO, Richard Barnes, his face flushed red as he paced in front of a group of tired-looking engineers. 3 months. 3 months and millions of dollars, and this is what I get. Richard slammed his hand on the table, making coffee mugs jump. Our competition will eat us alive if we don't fix this engine before the expo next month. May kept her head down, slowly working her way past the room. She'd seen these late-night shouting matches before. The prototype engine that sat in the center of the lab had been causing problems for weeks. She'd overheard enough conversations while emptying trash bins to know that something about the fuel efficiency was all wrong. "We've tried everything in the manual," said one engineer, rubbing his tired eyes. "Maybe the design itself is flawed." Richard ran his hands through his thinning hair. "That design is the future of this company. We've got investors breathing down our necks."
"I need solutions, not excuses."
May tried to make herself invisible as she moved her cleaning cart past the doorway, but the wheel caught on the threshold with a squeak that cut through the tense silence. Every head turned her way. "Sorry," she mumbled, keeping her eyes on the floor. "I'll come back later." But Richard Barnes was staring at her now, his frustration finding a new target. No, come on in. Maybe we need a fresh perspective." His voice dripped with sarcasm. "Maybe our cleaning lady can solve what my team of engineers with their fancy degrees can't figure out." Uncomfortable laughter rippled through the room. May felt heat rise to her cheeks as she stood frozen in the doorway, clutching her mop. "Mr. Barnes, that's not necessary," said a woman in a crisp blazer, shooting an apologetic look toward May. But Richard was on a roll now, theatrical in his frustration. He gestured broadly toward the prototype visible through the lab windows. "That engine out there is supposed to revolutionize the industry. It's supposed to be 20% more efficient than anything on the market. Instead, it's a very expensive paperweight." May shifted uncomfortably, wishing she could disappear. She knew she should just apologize again and leave, but something about the engine problem nagged at her. For weeks, she'd been studying the discarded blueprints left on desks and in trash bins, fascinated by the innovative design. Richard noticed her looking at the engine and misinterpreted her interest. "You know what?" he said, a dangerous smile spreading across his face. "I dare you." "Excuse me?" May finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I dare you to fix it." Richard stepped closer, towering over her small frame. "My team here has spent months and gotten nowhere. I'll give you 1 week. If you can make that engine work properly, I'll give you their job." He waved his hand at the engineers, who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. He was mocking her, using her to make a point to his team. "Me knew this and yet? And if I don't fix it?" she asked, surprising herself and everyone in the room. Richard laughed, genuinely amused now. "If you don't fix it, which you won't, you go back to mopping floors and my team here will finally get serious about finding a solution." He turned to the others. "See? Even she knows it's impossible." May thought about her tiny apartment with textbooks hidden under her bed. She thought about the mechanical engineering degree from her homeland that meant nothing here, about the student loans she was still paying off by cleaning floors at night. She thought about all the hours she'd spent studying those blueprints, fascinated by the engine's potential and puzzled by what seemed like an obvious flaw in the fuel delivery system. "Okay," she said quietly. "I accept." The room went silent. Richard's smug smile faltered for just a moment before returning, broader than before. "You're serious?" He looked around at his team, inviting them to share in the joke. A few chuckled nervously, but others looked embarrassed or curious. "Fine, great. Lisa, give her access to whatever she needs." He nodded toward the woman in the blazer who looked startled. "This should be entertaining at least." Lisa stood up, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Barnes, I don't think—" "1 week." Richard cut her off, already walking toward the door. "I expect an update next Friday." He paused beside May. "Don't worry about cleaning this room tonight. You've got bigger problems to solve." With that, he strode out, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind him. The engineers began gathering their things, some avoiding May's eyes, others staring openly. Lisa approached her with a tight smile. "I'm sorry about that," she said quietly. "He's under a lot of pressure, but that doesn't excuse—" "Well, any of that." May nodded, still clutching her mop like a lifeline. "It's okay. You don't actually have to do this," Lisa continued. "He'll have forgotten all about it by tomorrow." But May was looking through the glass walls at the engine that sat in the center of the lab. Beautiful in its complexity, flawed in its execution. For 3 months she'd been watching the engineers struggle, had been studying their discarded notes, had been thinking about solutions while she mopped around machines worth more than she'd make in a decade. "I want to try," she said softly. Lisa studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then. I'm Lisa Chen, head of engineering." She held out her hand. "May Liu," May replied, quickly wiping her hand on her uniform before shaking Lisa's. Just May is fine. By the time May left Titan Motors that night, her cleaning cart abandoned in a supply closet, she had an access badge clipped to her shirt and a stack of official engine documentation under her arm. The night guard had given her a confused look as she walked out the front door instead of the service entrance, but hadn't stopped her. Her tiny apartment was a 20-minute bus ride away, in a neighborhood where rent was cheap and questions were few. As she unlocked her door, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Patel, peeked out from across the hall. "Late night, May?" the old woman asked, her eyes curious beneath her silvery brows. "Yes, but a good one, I think," May replied with a small smile. Inside her apartment, May didn't even bother to change out of her uniform before spreading the engine documents across her small kitchen table. She pushed aside a stack of physics textbooks to make room, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and excitement. The wall above her bed was covered in sketches and notes, her own versions of the Titan Motors engine design, recreated from memory and snippets of blueprints she'd glimpsed. She'd been fascinated by the concept since she first saw it, spending her free time working through the theoretical problems just for the mental challenge. She hadn't expected to ever have a chance to actually work on it. May sat down and pulled out her worn notebook, flipping to a clean page. 1 week, she whispered to herself as she began to write. Outside her window, the city hummed with late-night energy, but May didn't notice. Her world had narrowed to the challenge before her. A challenge that might, just might, change everything. By morning, her table was covered in calculations and her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but May felt more alive than she had in years. The engine's flaw wasn't where the engineers were looking. They were focused on the computer systems, the electronics. But May suspected the problem was more basic, a fundamental issue with how fuel moved through the system, creating inefficiency that no amount of programming could fix. As dawn broke over the city, May finally collapsed onto her bed, still in her cleaner's uniform. Tomorrow, no, today, she would begin the real work. She'd need to run tests, build models, prove her theory, and she had exactly 6 days left to do it. The CEO's dare had been meant as an insult, a way to motivate his team by humiliating her. He had no idea what he'd just set in motion, or who he'd really challenged. Richard Barnes thought he was dealing with a simple cleaning woman. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next morning, May arrived at Titan Motors 2 hours earlier than her usual cleaning shift. Her eyes were heavy from lack of sleep, but her mind buzzed with ideas. She clutched a worn notebook filled with the night's calculations as she approached the front desk. Her cleaning uniform exchanged for the nicest clothes she owned, a simple blouse and dark pants that she saved for special occasions. The receptionist looked up with a puzzled expression. "Can I help you?" "I'm May Liu. I have authorization to work on the prototype engine." She held up the access badge Lisa had given her the night before, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The receptionist's eyebrows shot up in recognition. "Oh, you're the—" She stopped herself. "I mean, yes, of course. Go right ahead." News traveled fast, May realized. By now everyone probably knew about the CEO's ridiculous dare to the cleaning lady. She squared her shoulders and walked through the main entrance instead of the service door for the first time since she'd started working at Titan Motors. The engineering lab was mostly empty this early. A few bleary-eyed workers hunched over computers barely looked up as May walked in. She headed straight for the prototype that dominated the center of the room, a gleaming metal heart surrounded by tools, Computers and discarded coffee cups, you don't belong here. May turned to find a tall man glaring down at her. His badge identified him as Tom Wilson, senior engineer. Mr. Barnes gave me permission to work on the engine, she said quietly, showing her badge. Tom snorted. Yeah, I heard about his little stunt. Listen, we've been working on this for months. It's not a joke. I don't think it's a joke, May replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Then you're delusional. What do you know about combustion efficiency ratios or thermal containment? He crossed his arms. This isn't a sink you can unclog. Before May could respond, Lisa Chen walked into the lab, coffee in hand. She spotted the confrontation and quickly moved toward them. Tom, I see you've met May. Her tone was pleasant but firm. She has full authorization to work with the prototype this week. This is ridiculous, Lisa, Tom hissed. Barnes is making a mockery of our department. Lisa's smile remained fixed. Perhaps. Or perhaps we could use a fresh perspective. She turned to May. I've assigned you a workstation over here. You'll have access to all our test data and equipment. Tom walked away, muttering under his breath. Lisa led May to a small desk in the corner of the lab. Don't mind Tom. He's been working 16-hour days on this project. Lisa's voice softened. Look, I don't know your background, but I should warn you. This engine problem has stumped some of the best engineers in the industry. May nodded. I understand. Do you? Lisa studied her curiously. Why did you accept this challenge? You must know Barnes was just using you to make a point. May hesitated, then carefully opened her notebook to a page of detailed sketches. Because I think the problem isn't where everyone is looking. Lisa's eyes widened as she glanced at May's drawings. Where did you learn to do this? Back home, before I came here. I studied mechanical engineering. May closed the notebook quickly. It doesn't matter now. My degree doesn't count in this country. Understanding dawned on Lisa's face. So you clean floors instead? I do what I need to do, May replied simply. Now can you show me how to access the test logs? For the next few hours, May lost herself in data. The numbers confirmed what she'd suspected. The fuel wasn't flowing through the system correctly. The computer was trying to compensate, but it couldn't fix a fundamental mechanical issue. By afternoon, she'd become so absorbed that she barely noticed the stares from engineers passing by her desk. Tom had gathered a small group across the lab, occasionally glancing her way with undisguised skepticism. Don't look now, but you've become quite the attraction, said a friendly voice. May looked up to find a young man smiling at her. His badge read David Patel, Junior Engineer. I'm just working, she said. That's more than some of them expected, David replied with a grin. They had a bet going that you wouldn't show up at all. He leaned in, lowering his voice. I bet you would. You didn't seem like someone who scares easily. Thanks, I think. Need any help? He offered. I'm not exactly in the inner circle here myself. May hesitated, then decided she could use an ally. Actually, yes. I need to run a simulation, but I don't know how to use your software. David pulled up a chair. That I can definitely help with. With David's assistance, May was able to build a virtual model confirming her theory by late afternoon. The fuel injection system had a subtle design flaw. Microscopic turbulence was creating resistance, forcing the engine to work harder than necessary. This is actually really clever, David admitted, staring at her results. How did you spot this when no one else did? May shrugged. Sometimes being an outsider lets you see things differently. She didn't mention the countless nights she'd spent studying discarded blueprints, or the textbooks stacked in her apartment. We should show Lisa, David suggested, but before they could, Richard Barnes himself strode into the lab, flanked by two men in expensive suits. The CEO was clearly giving them a tour, gesturing grandly toward the prototype engine. Next month's expo will be our moment, Richard was saying. Once we solve this minor efficiency issue, Titan Motors will revolutionize the industry. One of the men nodded. The board is counting on it, Richard. Our investors are getting nervous about the delays. Richard's confident smile never faltered. We have our best people on it. In fact, he spotted May and a mischievous glint appeared in his eye. Gentlemen, let me show you something amusing. He walked over to May's workstation, the men following curiously. Engineers throughout the lab suddenly became very interested in their computers. This is May, our cleaning staff. I've given her a week to solve our engineering problem. Richard's tone was playful, as if sharing a clever joke. A little motivation for our actual team. The men looked confused. One of them frowned. Is that appropriate, Richard? Just having some fun, Richard replied, waving off the concern. So May making any progress? He clearly expected the answer to be no. May met his eyes. Yes, actually. I believe I've identified the problem. Richard's smile froze. Have you now? The fuel injection system has microscopic turbulence creating resistance. The computer can't compensate because it's a physical design flaw, not a programming issue. A silence fell over the lab. Richard stared at her, then let out a forced laugh. Well, you've certainly picked up some terminology. Very impressive. He turned to the men. She's been listening to our engineers talk clearly. I can show you the simulation, May offered quietly. Richard's smile tightened. That won't be necessary. Keep up the good work, though. He quickly steered the men away, launching into a discussion about production schedules. David let out a low whistle once they were out of earshot. He really didn't expect you to know what you're talking about. He still doesn't, May replied. That evening, long after most employees had left, May remained at her workstation, refining her solution. She needed to redesign the injection system, but do it in a way that wouldn't require rebuilding the entire engine. The cleaning crew arrived, giving her strange looks as they emptied trash bins around her, confused to see one of their own sitting at an engineer's desk. May gave them small smiles but kept working. She had less than 6 days left. As midnight approached, her eyes grew heavy. Just as she was considering finding a couch in the break room, Lisa appeared beside her desk. You're still here, Lisa observed, looking impressed. Find anything interesting? May hesitated, then brought up her simulation. The problem is here, she said, pointing to the screen, and I think I know how to fix it. Lisa studied the data, her expression changing from politeness to genuine interest, then to surprise. This could actually work. She looked at May with new eyes. Where did you really study engineering? Shanghai Technical University, May answered. I graduated top of my class. Then how did you end up cleaning our offices? May's smile was tired but determined. That's a long story. But right now I'd rather focus on proving that I can fix this engine. Lisa nodded slowly. I think you just might. She gathered her things to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for how you've been treated. Not everyone here is like Richard Barnes. After Lisa left, May finally allowed herself a moment of hope. One person believed in her. It wasn't much, but it was a start. On her bus ride home that night, she called the only person who had always believed in her, her former professor, now retired and living across the city. Professor Wu? It's May. I need your advice about something. Her mentor's voice, warm and familiar despite the static, brought tears to her eyes. May, of course! Tell me everything. As May described her situation, she looked out the bus window at the glittering city lights. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she no longer had to hide her talents. By the third day, May had settled into a new routine. She arrived early each morning, nodded politely to the receptionist who now knew her by name, and headed straight to her workstation in the engineering lab. The stares from other engineers had lessened somewhat, though she still felt like an exhibit in a strange museum. The cleaning lady who thought she could fix what they couldn't. Today was crucial. She needed to move from theory to practice. Morning, genius, David greeted her cheerfully, placing a coffee cup on her desk. Thought you might need this. You were still here when I left at 10 last night. Thanks, May said gratefully, taking a sip. I've got the design modifications ready. Now I need to test them. David peered at her computer screen. You want to physically modify the prototype? That's bold. I need to prove my solution works, not just in simulation. May pulled up a detailed drawing she'd refined overnight. I'll need access to the machine shop. That might be tricky. Tom practically lives down there, and he's not exactly your biggest fan. May sighed. Tom Wilson, the senior engineer, had moved from dismissive to hostile over the past 2 days as word spread that she might actually be onto something. Yesterday, he'd loudly questioned whether she was getting special help from someone else. I'll talk to Lisa, she decided. Before she could find the head engineer, the lab doors burst open and Richard Barnes strode in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Unlike his previous visit, he came alone and his face was serious as he scanned the room. Where is she? He demanded, eyes turned toward May's corner. Richard spotted her and marched over, his expensive shoes clicking against the polished floor. 3 days, he said without preamble. Half your time is up. The board is asking about my little experiment. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Please tell me you've given up so we can all move on. May met his gaze. I haven't given up, Mr. Barnes. I've identified the problem and designed a solution. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. Have you now? Yes, the fuel injection system creates microscopic turbulence that... He held up his hand. Spare me the technical details. Can you prove it works? I need access to the machine shop to modify a component for testing. Richard studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he glanced around at the engineers who were pretending not to listen. Fine, he said finally. Consider it granted. But I want results, not theories. If this is a waste of time... He left the threat hanging in the air as he walked away. David whistled low. Well, that's one way to get shop access, though Tom's going to love having you invade his territory. I don't need him to love it, May replied, gathering her designs. I just need him not to sabotage my work. The machine shop was in the basement, a cavernous space filled with the smell of metal and oil that reminded May of her university days. Her heart beat faster as they entered. This was where theory became reality. Tom was there, as expected, hunched over a lathe with 2 other engineers. He straightened when he saw May and David. No, he said immediately. Absolutely not. Mr. Barnes approved it, David explained, stepping slightly in front of May as if to shield her. I don't care if the Queen of England approved it. This is specialized equipment, May stepped forward. I know how to use it. I just need a few hours, Tom laughed. Right, and I know how to perform brain surgery. Actually, a new voice interrupted. She does know how to use it. They turned to find Professor Wu standing in the doorway, his aged frame still carrying the dignity of a lifetime in academia. His silver hair was neatly combed, and despite his casual clothes, he somehow looked like he belonged among the machines. Professor, Mei exclaimed in surprise. What are you doing here? You called me, remember? The old man smiled warmly. I thought you might need some moral support, he turned to Tom. May was my best student at Shanghai Tech. Her thesis on fuel efficiency, systems won international recognition. Tom's skeptical expression faltered. And who are you exactly? Dr. Henry Wu, former visiting professor at MIT and consultant to 3 major automotive companies. He didn't bother extending his hand. I taught this young woman everything she knows, which I suspect is considerably more than you're giving her credit for. An uncomfortable silence fell over the shop. Fine, Tom said finally. Use whatever you need. Just don't break anything. He nodded to the other engineers and they retreated to a far corner, occasionally glancing back with curious expressions. As they set up at a workstation, May whispered, You didn't have to come. Of course I did, Professor Wu replied. When my star pupil finally gets a chance to prove herself, I wouldn't miss it. He surveyed the designs on her tablet. Now show me what you've been working on. For the next several hours, May lost herself in the familiar rhythm of creation. With Professor Wu's guidance and David's eager assistance, she carefully machined a modified fuel injector according to her specifications. The simple act of working with her hands again, of watching metal take shape according to her vision, filled her with a joy she'd almost forgotten. By late afternoon, they had a finished component, small but precisely crafted. It looked almost identical to the original, with subtle but critical differences in its internal geometry. Will it work? David asked, examining it with wonder. In theory, it should increase efficiency by at least 15%, May replied, carefully wrapping the piece in a cloth. But we need to install it and run tests. Which won't happen today, Professor Wu noted, checking his watch. The lab will be closing soon. Then we'll do it first thing tomorrow, May said, determination in her voice. 3 more days until my deadline. As they packed up their tools, Tom approached, curiosity finally overcoming his hostility. What exactly did you make? May hesitated, then decided honesty was her best strategy. A modified fuel injector that eliminates the turbulence problem. The turbulence problem, he repeated flatly. The one that doesn't exist? The one your sensors weren't calibrated to detect, she corrected gently. It's subtle, but it's creating a compounding efficiency loss. Tom frowned. That's impossible. We would have seen it in the data. Not if you weren't looking for it. Professor Wu stepped in. Sometimes we get so focused on complex solutions that we miss the simple ones. Tom's frown deepened as he processed this. I want to see your test results, he said finally, his tone somewhere between demanding and curious. Tomorrow, May promised. That night, May invited Professor Wu and David to her tiny apartment for dinner. It was the first time in years she'd had guests, and despite the cramped space and simple food, it felt like a celebration. To May, David toasted with his water glass, the future of engineering at Titan Motors. Don't get ahead of yourself, she cautioned. I haven't fixed anything yet. Professor Wu studied the wall above her bed, covered in engine sketches and calculations. You always did your best work when everyone else said it was impossible. His eyes crinkled with pride. Remember your first engineering competition? May laughed. When my bridge collapsed during testing? And then you rebuilt it overnight better than before, he finished. That's when I knew you were special. I just hope this time works out better than my last job, she said, her smile fading slightly. What happened at your last job? David asked curiously. May exchanged glances with Professor Wu. Let's just say not everyone appreciates being proven wrong by someone they underestimated. The next morning, May arrived at the lab earlier than usual, heart pounding with anticipation. Today would prove whether her solution worked, whether she was truly the engineer she still believed herself to be. To her surprise, she found Lisa, Tom, and several other engineers already gathered around the prototype engine. Word travels fast, Lisa explained with a smile. Everyone wants to see if your theory holds up. Even more surprising was Richard Barnes himself, sitting in a chair at the back of the lab, pretending to work on his phone but obviously there for the test. May took a deep breath and placed her modified component on the workbench. Then let's not keep them waiting. With David's help and under the watchful eyes of a dozen engineers, she carefully installed the new injector. Each movement was deliberate, her fingers steady despite the pressure. This moment, connecting theory to practice, problem to solution, was what she'd spent years training for. Ready for the moment of truth? Lisa asked when they'd finished. May nodded, stepping back. Start it up. As the engine roared to life, every eye in the room watched the monitors tracking the performance metrics in real time. For a terrifying moment, the numbers looked unchanged. Then, as the engine warmed up, the efficiency ratings began to climb. 10% better, 12%, 15%. A murmur ran through the gathered engineers. Tom's mouth fell open slightly. 17% improvement, Lisa announced, her voice filled with disbelief. That's better than our target. May felt a wave of relief and vindication wash over her. The solution worked even better than she'd calculated. Professor Wu squeezed her shoulder gently, his eyes shining with pride. Across the room, Richard Barnes stood up slowly, his expression unreadable as he processed what this meant, not just for the engine, but for his assumptions about the woman he'd dared to fix it. The news spread through Titan Motors like wildfire. By lunchtime, engineers from other departments had found excuses to visit the lab, pretending they needed tools or advice while stealing glances at both the engine and the woman who had fixed it. May tried to focus on documenting her work, but it was hard to ignore the whispers and stares. You're officially a legend, David told her, dropping into the chair beside her desk, the cleaning lady who outsmarted the entire engineering department. I wish people would stop calling me that, May said quietly. I'm an engineer who happens to clean floors. Not for much longer, I bet. David nodded toward the glass-walled conference room where Richard Barnes was engaged in what looked like a heated discussion with Lisa and several board members. They've been at it for an hour, May's stomach tightened. Despite the success of her modification, she wasn't naive enough to believe her troubles were over. In her experience, powerful people rarely admitted they were wrong without finding someone else to blame. What do you think they're saying? She asked. David shrugged. Probably trying to figure out how to take credit for your work while saving face. Before May could respond, Tom Wilson approached her desk. The senior engineer looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. I owe you an apology, he said stiffly. I was unprofessional. May was surprised by the gesture. Thank you. That means a lot. Tom nodded, then added, For what it's worth, I ran additional tests this morning. Your solution is solid. I've never seen efficiency improvements like this from such a simple modification. Coming from Tom, this was high praise indeed. May smiled. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the hardest to see. Where did you learn to think like this? He asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. At university, but mostly from Professor Wu. He always taught us to question our assumptions. She hesitated, then added, and cleaning the lab at night gave me time to study the engine when no one was watching. I saw things from different angles. Tom looked like he was about to say more when the conference room door opened. Richard Barnes emerged, followed by the board members. His face was a mask of professional composure as he scanned the lab and spotted May. "Ms. Liu," he called. "A word, please." The room fell silent as May stood and walked toward him, acutely aware of all eyes following her. She straightened her shoulders and kept her head high, determined not to show her nervousness. Richard led her to his private office, a space she had cleaned countless times but never entered as a guest. The large windows overlooked the city, a view she had only seen while wiping glass in the early morning hours. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to one of the sleek chairs across from his desk. May sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from trembling. Richard remained standing, looking out the window for a long moment before speaking. "You've created quite a situation," he said finally, his back still to her. "The board is impressed by the test results, I'm glad," May replied simply. He turned to face her. "Let me be direct, Ms. Liu. This puts me in an awkward position. I made a foolish comment in the heat of the moment, and now you need to decide whether to honor your promise." May finished for him. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "My promise? You said if I fixed the engine, I could have a job in engineering." She met his gaze steadily. "I fixed it." Richard sat down behind his desk with a sigh. "It's not that simple. We have protocols, hiring procedures. You don't even have a recognized degree in this country." "I have 17% improved efficiency," May countered. "Isn't that what matters?" "What matters is how things look, Ms. Liu. Titan Motors is a publicly traded company with shareholders and industry partners. We can't just promote the cleaning staff to engineering positions because of a lucky insight." May felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Luck had nothing to do with it." "Perhaps not," Richard conceded. "But perception is reality in business. Surely you understand my position." She did understand all too well. It was the same position her previous employer had taken when she'd suggested improvements to their manufacturing process, improvements they had implemented while keeping her in a junior role. "What are you offering, Mr. Barnes?" "A compromise. We'll create a special consultant position for you. Better pay, of course, and you'll work with the engineering team on the engine." He smiled thinly. "And naturally you won't need to continue your cleaning duties." It wasn't what he had promised, but it was better than nothing. Still, something in his tone made May hesitate. "And the credit for the solution?" she asked. Richard's smile didn't waver. "The company will announce a breakthrough developed by our engineering team, with your valuable assistance. Everyone wins." "Everyone except me," May said quietly. "Don't be dramatic, Ms. Liu. I'm offering you a significant promotion and a chance to continue your work. Many would be grateful for the opportunity." Before May could respond, there was a knock at the door. Lisa Chen entered, looking between them with a concerned expression. "Sorry to interrupt, but the press is here for the engine demonstration," she said. "You asked to be notified," Richard stood quickly. "Press? I didn't schedule any press today." Lisa looked uncomfortable. "Actually, Professor Wu did. He contacted several technical journalists about a revolutionary breakthrough by a brilliant young engineer. They're in the lobby now with cameras." Richard's face flushed with anger. "That old man had no authority. He said you'd be delighted to showcase how Titan Motors recognizes talent regardless of position or background." Lisa's eyes flicked to May. He was quite persuasive. For a moment, May thought Richard might explode. Then, remarkably, he laughed, a short, harsh sound with little humor in it. "Well played," he said, looking at May with new respect. "Your professor is quite the strategist. He believes in giving credit where it's due," May replied. Richard straightened his tie, mind clearly racing. "Lisa, prepare the lab for the demonstration. Ms. Liu and I need to adjust our arrangement." After Lisa left, Richard paced behind his desk. "You understand this changes things." "I hope so," May said. If I present you as the sole genius behind this breakthrough, the board will question why I didn't recognize your talent sooner. My judgment will be called into doubt. Or, May suggested, you could be the visionary leader who saw potential where others missed it, the CEO who challenged convention by daring a maintenance worker to solve what engineers couldn't. Richard stopped pacing, considering her words. She could almost see the story forming in his mind, not a tale of his mistake, but of his brilliance in spotting hidden talent. A bold management strategy, he mused. Unconventional talent identification. Exactly, May agreed. You weren't mocking me. You were testing me. You suspected all along that I had the skills to solve the problem. A slow smile spread across Richard's face. That's actually not bad. He studied her with new interest. You understand the game, Ms. Liu. I understand people, Mr. Barnes. We all want recognition for our contributions. And what exactly do you want? He asked directly. What you promised. A real engineering position, proper credit for my solution, and a fair salary. She took a deep breath. And a program to identify other overlooked talent in your company. Richard raised an eyebrow. Ambitious, practical, she corrected. How many other solutions are you missing because you don't see the people who have them? The intercom on Richard's desk buzzed. Mr. Barnes, the journalists are asking for you, his assistant's voice announced. Richard straightened his jacket, decision made. Very well, Ms. Liu. You'll have your engineering position, pending proper paperwork, of course. And we'll discuss this talent identification program after the expo. Thank you, May said sincerely. As they walked toward the door, Richard paused. I have to ask, why did you keep working here, cleaning floors with an engineering degree? May thought about the student loans, the immigration challenges, the countless job rejections. Because I needed work, and because I still believed that someday, someone would see what I could do rather than where I came from. Richard nodded slowly. Well, today is that day, apparently. He opened the door, his public smile already in place. Now let's go show the world what Titan Motors' newest engineer has created. They walked together toward the lab, where journalists waited with cameras and microphones. Through the glass doors, me could see Professor Wu standing proudly next to the engine, David hovering nearby, and Tom explaining something to a reporter with surprising enthusiasm. For the first time in years, May felt like herself again, not a shadow person working in empty rooms after everyone had gone home, but an engineer, a problem solver, a creator. Whatever happened next, they couldn't take that away from her again. As Richard pushed open the lab doors, cameras turned in their direction and May stepped into the light. 6 months had passed since the day Mei Liu had stepped into the spotlight. The industry expo that had once loomed as a deadline was now a triumphant memory. Titan Motors' revolutionary engine had stolen the show, and orders were pouring in faster than production could handle. May stood at the window of her new office, watching workers scurry across the company parking lot below. Her reflection in the glass still surprised her sometimes. Gone was the cleaning uniform, replaced by professional clothes that she no longer had to save for special occasions. Her hair, once always tied back for practical reasons, now framed her face in a style that Lisa had helped her choose for her official company portrait. A knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Got a minute? David poked his head in, grinning. He'd been promoted too, now leading a team implementing May's fuel efficiency techniques across other product lines. For you, always, she smiled, gesturing to a chair. The new batch of applications just came in. He dropped a tablet on her desk. Thought you'd want first look. May picked it up eagerly. The Titan Talent Initiative, her program to identify promising employees throughout the company, was her pride and joy, equal to any engineering breakthrough. In just 5 months, they discovered a security guard with a gift for software design, a receptionist with untapped marketing genius, and a janitor whose suggestions had improved assembly line efficiency by 12%. 32 applications this round, David observed. Word's getting around. Any standouts? There's a cafeteria worker with a chemistry background who has ideas about better battery cooling systems. And a night watchman who built a miniature robot in his spare time. May nodded, already scrolling through the submissions. Schedule interviews for next week. And make sure that management doesn't know who they are until after evaluation, David finished. I remember the rules. The rules had been May's first demand when setting up the program. Applicants' positions and backgrounds remained anonymous until their ideas were judged on merit alone. No prejudice, no assumptions, just pure problem-solving potential. Another knock interrupted them. Lisa Chen stood in the doorway, her expression unusually serious. "Richard wants to see you. Both of you now." May and David exchanged concerned glances. Since the engine breakthrough, Richard Barnes had given May considerable freedom to run her department. But their relationship remained complex, a mixture of respect, wariness, and unspoken tension. "Did he say why?" May asked, standing. "The board is with him," Lisa replied. "That's all I know." As they walked to the executive floor, May felt a familiar knot in her stomach. Despite her success, despite the newspaper, articles calling her the engineering phenomenon of the year, a part of her still expected to be handed a mop at any moment and told the experiment was over. They found Richard in the main conference room with 4 board members. Large windows overlooked the test track where several prototype vehicles circled, engines purring with May's efficiency modifications. On the table lay folders with the Titan Motors logo. "Ah, there she is," Richard announced as they entered, his smile broad but his eyes calculating as always. "The woman of the hour. You wanted to see us?" May kept her voice even. "Indeed." Richard gestured for them to sit. "The board has been reviewing the quarterly results and they're impressed." One of the board members, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, nodded. 18% increase in orders, production barely keeping pace with demand, and the stock price has doubled since the expo. All because of an engine modification that none of our highly paid engineers could develop, added another board member. Quite remarkable. May shifted uncomfortably. It was a team effort to implement the solution. Always modest, Richard said smoothly. But we know where credit is due. He slid one of the folders across the table to her. Which brings us to the reason for this meeting. May opened the folder cautiously. Inside was a contract with her name on it and a figure that made her breath catch. "We're establishing a new advanced innovation division," Richard explained. "And the board unanimously agrees that you should lead it. With a budget 5 times your current department," added the silver-haired woman, "and full control over staffing and project selection." May stared at the contract, unable to find words. 6 months ago, she had been cleaning these very floors after hours. Now they were offering her control of what would be the company's most prestigious division. "There's more," Richard continued, sliding a folder to David. "We want your talent initiative expanded company-wide, with Mr. Patel here running it under your supervision." David opened his folder and his eyes widened. "This is very generous." "It's very practical," corrected the silver-haired board member. "Your program has already identified valuable talent we were wasting. Imagine what you could do with proper resources." May finally found her voice. "Why now?" Richard exchanged glances with the board members. "Show her," he said. The silver-haired woman pushed a tablet toward May. On the screen was an email with a competitor's logo. "They've offered to double your current salary if you'll join them. So have 3 other companies," May frowned. "I haven't applied anywhere else." "Of course not," Richard said. "But word has spread. Your patent applications are public. Everyone in the industry knows what you've accomplished." He leaned forward. "We're not fools, Ms. Liu. We know talent when we see it. Even if it took us longer than it should have." It was the closest thing to an apology she would ever get from him, May realized. Not spoken out of genuine regret, perhaps, but out of practical business sense, which for Richard Barnes was almost the same thing. "I need time to think about this," she said carefully. "Of course," Richard agreed smoothly. "Take the weekend, but we'll need your answer by Monday." As May and David left the conference room, they were too stunned to speak until they reached the elevator. "Are you going to take it?" David finally asked. May pressed the button for their floor. "I don't know yet." That evening, May sat in Professor Wu's modest apartment, the contract spread on his kitchen table between cups of tea. The old man studied it carefully, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of approval. "They're afraid of losing you," he concluded, setting down the final page, "as they should be." "It's an incredible opportunity," May acknowledged. But you wonder if it's being offered for the right reasons," Professor Wu finished for her. "If they truly value you or merely fear losing what you can do for them." May nodded. "Exactly. The professor smiled gently. Does the flower care why the bee visits? It gets pollinated either way. He tapped the contract. Take their money and their resources. Use them to build something meaningful. And if Richard tries to take credit for my future innovations too, then you'll handle him as you did before. Professor Wu's eyes twinkled. You've outplayed him once already. Later, walking through the park near her new apartment, a spacious one-bedroom with large windows and space for proper bookshelves, May found herself reflecting on how much had changed. She no longer rode the late-night bus or counted coins for groceries. Her degree had been officially recognized, her back pay as an engineering consultant had cleared her student loans, and tomorrow she would meet with a young woman who cleaned the Titan Motors cafeteria, but had brilliant ideas about solar cell efficiency. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Whatever you decide, I'm with you, May smiled. There were still battles ahead. Richard Barnes hadn't become a different person overnight, and corporate politics remained as treacherous as ever. But she was no longer fighting alone or from the shadows. Monday morning arrived clear and bright. May walked through the main entrance of Titan Motors, nodding to security guards who now greeted her by name. In her bag was the signed contract, along with a list of conditions she'd added, including expanded scholarships for engineering students from disadvantaged backgrounds and a company-wide mentorship program. Richard was waiting in his office, trying to appear casual, though May could see the tension in his shoulders. Have you made your decision? May placed the signed contract on his desk. I have. Relief flickered across his face before he controlled it. Excellent. The board will be pleased. I've added some conditions, she said, pointing to the attached pages. Richard skimmed them, his expression shifting from annoyance to grudging respect. Always negotiating, Ms. Liu. Always building, Mr. Barnes. May met his gaze steadily. A better company benefits everyone, including you. He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. I made a fortunate mistake the day I dared you to fix that engine. It wasn't about the dare, May replied. It was about finally having the chance to show what I could do. There are millions of people like me out there. Brilliant minds trapped in the wrong roles because no one sees past their uniforms or accents or backgrounds. And you intend to find them all? There was a hint of genuine curiosity in his voice. As many as I can, May said simply. Richard signed the conditions without further argument and extended his hand. Welcome to the executive team, Ms. Liu. Try not to revolutionize everything at once. May shook his hand, thinking of all the ideas already taking shape in her mind. I make no promises, Mr. Barnes. As she left his office, heading toward the engineering lab where her team waited for direction, May felt a quiet sense of completion. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but she had earned her place, not through luck or charity, but through the brilliance that had always been within her, waiting for its moment to shine. The engine that had started it all now sat in a place of honor in the lab, a testament to what could happen when someone dared to see possibility where others saw only limitations.